Hello.
Hello.
Can everybody
see
Hello.
me?
Can everybody hear and see me okay? If anybody's, I know there's 11 viewers on here, which is awesome. There we go. I'm going to move down a little bit. There we go. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and can you hear me okay?
I'm just gonna go ahead and
Can you hear me okay?
I'm just gonna go ahead and can you hear me okay?
I'm echoing like crazy here. Sorry if I'm well, if everybody can hear me and see me okay, just if anybody's tuned in, just go ahead and type in and just say yes or something, and then we'll kind of get rolling here. All right. Well, I'm gonna assume. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, I'm Robin Rosado, Director of Instruction here for Top Speed Golf. I am not Quentin. I know the email that I sent out today, kind of highlighting the office hours. Quentin is out today. I'm gonna lower this a touch here, and I'm just subbing in for him. So, like I said, I'm Robin. I do handle all of the in-person instruction here for Top Speed Golf, as well as all of the clinics, and I do a lot of the online lessons. I don't do any videos anymore because of the busyness of clinics and in-person lessons. So we're really lucky about that. Before I do get started, a shameless plug. If you do want to work with me online, just let me know. Shoot me an email, robin@topspeedgolf.com. And if you do want to come in for an in-person lesson, also let me know, robin@topspeedgolf.com. I am booked up through the end of April as of right now. So just kind of giving you a heads up if you're looking for in-person lessons. So I know there's already some questions in here, all focused on shallowing, which is I was kind of prepared for that since we're launching, the new shallowing course. So and everyone's kind of talking about it. So all the questions that were already in here are specific to shallowing. So we'll talk more about that. And of course, anybody else has any questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll answer it. So let's go. Let me scroll up here and see the first one from today. Kevin E says, I've been doing the 20-minute shallowing fix. I can hook all day long now, but if I try and swing to the right, it either goes left and hooks left or goes right and fades right. There are a lot of shots that go pretty much straight. Should I just give up and take the straight shots and move on? I probably hit 500 balls with the simulator. Well, the idea behind it is obviously if we're hooking it, we're really extreme with closing the face. So what happens? Let me I know Clay talks about it, but just kind of reminding people because it seems like there's a lot of questions of people who are in a nice way struggling with it. So what we're trying to do is if we can get you understanding closing the face, right? So de-lofting this face. And there's another question, I'm going to talk more about that in a second, but in how we do that, if we can get that nailed down, and let's say you are hooking it, the idea of it is for you to make it easy, and it is proven to make it easy for you to trust shallowing the club, or so that's just swinging more into out. So instead of working on this first, right, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong here, if you've done this in the past with an instructor, where if you've come over the top or you're a little bit steep and you worked on shallowing out your plane and swinging more from the inside out, well, there's a high chance, and again, that could be wrong, it could be for you personally, but there's a high chance that you really struggled with the contact or really struggled with the idea of it and just not trusting the process, frustration kind of sets in, that type of deal. So what happens is if we get you hitting the ball solid first and closing the face, then that makes it easier for you to shallow the club on the way down. So going back to your point there, Kevin, as far as you're hooking it, hitting it right, hitting it straight, well, and this is kind of variability. As long as the goal is if you look on video for yourself and you're in a simulator, hopefully you have the ability to video yourself and you look to see if you're getting the club shallow here, dropping, dissecting the right bicep, or in the cone of consistency here, or shallowing out. and then you're letting yourself release the club out in front, and then now you're producing, probably a straight ball, little baby draw. If you're struggling with right and left, then maybe, again, there's another question on here there, Kevin, that speaks to usually if you hear right and left, especially high right, we're not quite releasing the club or closing the face as we should. So there's a high chance that you're doing still more of this. So now we're, in essence, extension flexion. So you can see here, let me back up a little bit here. So you can see by doing that, that can also close the face rapidly, or I can also add off the face and leave it open. So it's a factor of timing with that. So then my suggestion then is to really focus on twisting the hands down. So that is lead wrist bowing out, palm of the right hand turning down. We go to impact here, face is square and be lofted. If you're trying to hook it, well then of course the face is going to be closed. So yes, we're trying to get you to where ideally you're still shallowing out, hitting the ball straight, right? But we're doing it by finding the extremes, again, through that variability. It is proven that through variability, going to the extreme helps you find kind of like the middle of that. So hopefully that answers your question there, Kevin, as far as what you should choose as far as a ball flight is concerned. Let me go ahead and go into the next one here. Kind of the same thing. Danny C says, let me go here. I feel that drill 2 of the shallowing fix is somewhat misleading. I'm sorry to hear that, Danny. Drill 1 has us closing the face to the extreme to get the ball to turn hard left. No instruction in drill 2 indicated we should stop doing so. Okay, sorry about, again there, Danny. If I've got the face extremely closed, it doesn't matter how much I swing inside out, the ball will start to the right, will not start to the right. Old ball flight rules said path controls initial direction. New ball flight rules say that club face controls initial direction. I went through an entire large bucket for draw 2, and the best I can get was a ball starting at target and still going hard left. Okay. Wow. Sorry to hear that, Danny. Wow. And again, another kind of struggling with it here. I totally get it. So old ball flight rules, the one thing that we can say to that is we have technology now, right? And so technology, you can, let's put it, for example, if I'm swinging, let me kind of address that first since you brought up the old ball flight rules. If I'm swinging 10 degrees this way here, 10 degrees, but the club face itself, it's a dead square to target path, right? Face to path. If the face is dead square, 0, 0, that means the ball is literally going to go 10 degrees to the right. So that's kind of depending on how fast you're swinging, that's far to the right. So then if I'm swinging 1 degree into out this way, right? 1 degree into out, but my face, to your point there, Danny, is, maybe 14 degrees dead shut, which is kind of a lot. Then, of course, that's going to lead to a big hook. So it's all on the factor of those numbers and where the ball direction, what is greater, to put it simply. Those are very extreme. So, yes, where the face is pointed, typically the ball is going to go. So that's kind of, again, more new ball flight rules. To your point, there's 2 factors here, Danny, is that if, again, it's very common, right? It's very common to flip our hands to do this, right? Super common. So you'll see a little bit of flexion there in the left wrist, extension in the left wrist here, and that also closes the face. I'm not saying this is what you're doing there, Danny. I haven't seen your swing, so please forgive me if that's not what you are doing, but I can guarantee you, I've done thousands of lessons in my life. Very small handful of players do not give a little bit of extension flexion by releasing. I have scratch players who still kind of flip their hands a tiny bit. So this is a semi-new concept, but that's what should be happening. So what I'm saying is that if you're doing this, that can close the face very rapidly. It's going to be hard. I can swing into out and do this and still get the face closing so fast. What we're doing here, we're twisting, and yes, we over-exaggerate this motion of twisting the hands down and twisting it through by shutting it a lot. Eventually, what we want to do is twist it to over at least square, face is square target, get used to that, and then release the club more out there in front. So then again, if you're hitting the ball straight, then you're just overdoing it. Forgive us for not explaining in drill number 2 that you should stop doing that. Again, this is for those, if you're dead hooking it this way like that, we just saw to see the ball start out left. I mean, you're right. If I keep overdoing this, I'm going to keep hooking it. So then find the common ground there. So the idea is for you to still swing into out and get the ball hooking. So now you find the common ground and try to think of more of a square club face coming through the ground. So you're not doing maybe this as much now that you're swinging more into out. Going back to what I was saying there before is that look at yourself. My suggestion there is video yourself from the down the line view and see if you are shallow in the club. You could still be coming potentially. Again, I haven't seen your swing, but potentially still be coming a little bit out to in. No matter how much you swing into out, trust me, feel versus real in this game, right? It's always, if you're coming in steep like this, it's hard to change that in a split second, right? So that's why we go very extreme with the drills, because over exaggerations are key in this game to truly making a change within the golf swing. So hopefully that helps you out there, Danny. Sorry that there's a little bit of struggles with the drills with this. I totally get it. Golf is not an easy sport by any means. All right, ID. In the shallow and training videos, Clay talks about turning the club to close the face on the downswing. How do you know how much to rotate too much? Kind of going back to Danny's point there, it's if you find yourself, the idea is if you are struggling and coming over the top and then you have a slice pattern, well, obviously if you have a slice pattern, you're leaving the face wide open. So if we get to a point of extreme and really shut the face, you can see how that ball's trying to hook on me, right? If I really rotate down and I'm overdoing it, well, then of course you try to find the common ground there. So then you go back, so let's say if you're slicing it, you're leaving the face open and potentially flipping, right? Then we don't want that. So then we get something more neutral that gets us hitting it more straight and down the line. Obviously, you're going to be swinging more probably in to out than you normally do instead of coming over the top with that. So hopefully that makes sense. We're seeing a lot of kind of common questions here when it talks to overdoing the closing face motion, right? Again, we're talking about the extreme for those who come steep over the top and leaving the face wide open. So we're just trying to get you to close the face to get used to that, right? And then you shallow it out and get the same motion here, and twisting the hands, bowing out the lead wrist. And of course, if you're hooking it a lot, then we just kind of dial it back down if you find yourself overdoing it. The number one thing, I'm going to keep saying it, the number one thing is to video yourself so that you learn to coach yourself, right? Video yourself from down the line, see if you are truly shallowing out. Video yourself here from face on if you can. Obviously, if you can't, okay, but maybe at home, video yourself to make sure that you're doing it correctly, because this year is not the easiest thing. Almost every time people are doing this, and in fact, they're doing this. I had a lesson today in person, a 2 handicap. We're working on getting this here. His ball flight's kind of higher, softer. You look on camera, he has a little bit of here. So the shaft lean line, there's like 4 degrees of shaft lean, a little bit of extension here, and you kind of maintain that. And this is a 2 handicap here, right? So we worked on de-lofting the face here. In essence, closing it down, trying to bow out the lead wrist a little bit, and almost feel like he's kind of maintained that through the hitting area. And then his launch went that way down, right? So he started hitting it more kind of like you see a tour player. But you look at it on camera, view versus real, right? It's barely bowed out compared to the real deal. You still see a little bit of extension there when he was not conscious of over-exaggerating, bowing out that lead wrist down. And there are points of mobility. I know there's another question here that talks about, mobility. What do you do if you can't bow the lead wrist? So I think that's Randy's question here. Randy says, in the shallowing the club session, Clay explained that it's difficult for some players to bow the wrist on the downswing to square the face at impact. So rather than bowing your wrist, could you accomplish the same square impact simply by closing the face at address and keep your wrist flat at impact? Yeah, it's kind of one of those, it's kind of one of those Band-Aid type things, right? In reality, and yes, if you can't bow out your lead wrist, I want to see the left wrist somewhat flat because we don't want to be we don't want to be creating extension into our lead wrist here. But by closing the face and keeping it flat, again, all you're doing is if I close the face at address and I keep my left wrist flat, you actually have to twist the face open. So again, let me kind of slow that down a little bit there for you. If I set up to the ball face, let's say I'm gonna see if you can see this here. Yeah. So if I set up to the ball with the face very shut and I try to keep the left wrist flat through the hitting area, what I'm training myself to do in my hands, I'm training myself to lead. So my hands think the face is open, right? So then there's another factor of timing. So if I actually do release it, even in the slightest bit, with the face being closed at address, then you're going to really hook it. Or I'm going to start training my hands. So again, if the face is square, closed at address, and I try to keep that face square through the hitting area, yeah, it creates a lot of shaffling. It's actually a great drill if you're flipping your hands. But again, in a normal swing is also going to train yourself from holding it off too much and potentially leaving the face open. So now you're potentially inviting a two-way miss while doing that. What I'll do for players is if they find themselves like they hook the ball a lot. This is something totally separate from shallowing, totally separate from the shallowing course. And the player's hooking it a lot. What I would do is have them set up as a drill, have them set up to the ball with the face dead shut and go to the extreme and try to hit a ball that's dead straight. And what that does is that forces the player to keep the hands, very neutral and kind of going ahead longer. Again, that's a training. We're training the extreme. So then, in the reality, when you go to actually let the club release, you're not releasing it as hard and rolling the hands over as much. So to your point, I mean, if you can't bow out the lead wrist there at impact, my other suggestion then is to focus on right wrist or trail hand extension. So you usually most players have more extension. So this is more extension of either hand in the wrist than flexion here. This is flexion or bowed lead wrist or bowed left wrist there. So then my focus would then be focusing on this here, this extension. So you can see that face again is very de-lofted here, and I'm creating a lot of shaffling as I'm doing that. If I'm coming more into out, obviously, the face is going to be releasing or coming in closed and then releasing. So that's if you want to focus on the wrist, that's my suggestion, is to focus on that trail hand extension, or we talk about that in the straight line release series, where Clay talks about heading the turf with the palm of the right hand and the downswing, right? And releasing it more out there in front. So hopefully that makes sense there and backs up a little bit. Cool. Jim B, another shallowing question. Where in the downswing should the rolling of the left wrist occur? Does it matter if I start rolling the wrist closed as I reach the top, start down, hit arm parallel, or wait to club parallel? That's a great question there, Jim. On tour nowadays, because shallowing is such a hot subject, and there's a lot of benefits to shallowing. The face is square. We're de-lofting the face more there at impact. For a tour player, the path and face ratio are really, really, really square. The ball is just exploding off the face when we shallow it out. So what we're seeing these days is Jim who asked that. As we go into the backswing here, where we're seeing now PGA Tour players shallow the club is about the last 4% of the backswing. So you notice this here as I'm transitioning to the very top of my swing, I'm starting to get the club slightly shallow. So that is going to be, the right wrist, again, creating an extension of trail wrist here. And my lead wrist is slightly beginning to bow. Again, that's kind of hard for, a common golfer to kind of comprehend 4% of backswing. But to your point there, Jim, it's all really relative to the person. What's happening. Some people can actually be here at the very top, pull down on the hands, and then actually do the opposite and steepen it. So it's all very relative. So that's why I'm talking about more of what we see now in PGA Tour players, is that at the very top of the swing, we're seeing a little bit of shallowing beginning to happen as we transition to downswing. So as I go to the very top, I'm transitioning to the downswing here. So you see the momentum of my lower body beginning to kind of get lower and rotate. You can see that momentum is carrying on. and me shallowing the club as I rotate, rotate my hips open to impact. You can see the face is becoming very square target line. Obviously, I'm over exaggerating this, but I have a lot of shaft lean here. I'm releasing the club more out there in front. So that's an ideal world. To now you're coming to your second point of your question there, Jim, is that as we shallow here begin to shallow here at the very top, it continues throughout the downswing. So now I'm here. By the time lead arm's parallel to ground and downswing, now I have this really good angle here on my club shaft, again in our what we call that cone of consistency there. And as you continue on, as we rotate the body open, I'm still continuing. You can see I'm exaggerating this look. So this is very close right now. I'm just for exaggeration purposes. So coming down now, again, twisting or de-locking the face here, rotate to impact there. That's exaggerated, that's slightly closed, but that's what's happening. So when I'm teaching somebody, what seems to work out the best in person wise, not necessarily online, in person, is that we focus a lot on that transition. So slightly bowing it or shallowing as we go to the very top to first move and downswing here. So I do a lot of slow motion drills, a lot of practice swings, over exaggerations. This is actually probably one of the best things to do when you're shallowing the club, is hit a ball. First of all, what I would do if you're by yourself and you don't have somebody there with you, you don't have a coach, and you're trying to figure out how you shallow it out, I would video you again from the downline angle here to see if you are shallowing the club in the transition here. So you're seeing this angle here pretty early. So I would video yourself doing that a couple times, do a couple practice swings here, and then video yourself and check yourself. Then the best thing I would do, again, still videoing yourself, the best thing I would do is hit a ball in what you would think is absolute slow motion. So you go here and make contact with the golf ball there. That kind of helps with that little ball bound mentality type thing. Go video yourself and to see if you truly shallowed the club, right? And if you haven't, then let's get more extreme with that in the downswing. Again, go super slow motion here, really shallow out, rotate through and make contact with the golf ball. Again, making contact helps with that ball down mentality. Now, when you go to the video and you see like, oh, wow, I've really shallowed out the club. And I'm kind of exaggerating as I do these slow motion practice swings. But when you see it for yourself, then your brain starts saying, okay, I can trust this process. I can trust this change. So now neural patterns start to switch a little bit and say, okay, even though I feel like it's way extreme, I just looked it on video and like, I'm not. It's actually right where I want to be. So then now we can do that and increase the speed a little bit. Right? That's maybe a little bit faster than probably should. Again, with the over exaggeration, video yourself from the down the line view, see where you're at, give yourself a little bit of an accountability on that. And then again, continue on faster and faster and faster all the way to a full swing. And that's one of the best ways to recreate a swing change, but especially with something like shallowing the club. So hopefully that helps there. I know I kind of went a long explanation on shallowing there. Dan S, I disagree. In lesson 2, we are still supposed to hit it to the right, but let it still hook. But any level, but it must definitely draw. Then in step 3, we make the face straight to target. It all worked textbook for me. Oh, I think so. You're saying, oh, this is a different. So it was Danny C. I apologize there, Dan. So then in step 3, we make the face straight to target. Yeah, it all worked textbook for me, but I hit a straight ball or fade easier than a natural draw. Now I'm hooking around trees on purpose, and my game is doing much better. Wow, that's awesome to hear, Dan. I'll tell you one thing. I'll dive a little bit since there's no more questions. And good job, by the way, Dan. That's awesome. It just sounds like, again, what we're trying to do there really is by doing the extremes, it just gives you a hyper awareness on everything, on every level. You can take this to any sport, any function. That if you go to the extremes, then it helps you find, kind of like a middle ground easier, right? So that's kind of what we're doing there. And yes, to your level number 3 does focus on trying to get the face more square after you've gone to the extreme. I can't emphasize this enough to video yourself. right? I know it's not easiest for most, but at least from the down on angle, is when it comes to shallowing the club, that's the reason why, again, we tackle closing the face first. When it comes to shallowing the club, it's literally the number one thing that people do wrong, because people drop the hands down too much. People end up getting stuck on the way down, doing all kinds of things there. Number two is the feel versus real thing, right? And when you come from an extreme of, let's say, steep or over the top, to go shallow, it's literally not the easiest at all. You got a lot of tour players who still work on that, like a Justin Rose. He's constantly doing this still, and forcing himself to rotate through. And that's years down the line. I've been doing the same thing for years and making sure I get to a position that I want to. So it's all field versus real, right? Go to extremes, learn the extremes. It's going to make it a heck of a lot easier to to find the middle ground there. No problem, Jim. Okay, let me talk about, well, I guess we're talking about shallowing the club. I'm going to talk about one thing that I'm doing personally here. There's no questions in there. That I'm doing personally to shallow the club. So for me, this is me. I'm not saying that this is for everybody. I'm not saying that this is for you. This is what's going on. This is not how we shallow the club. This is me personally. I've always been more of a flat plane swinger, so I've got myself to get a little bit more here. But my tendency to shallow the club within my swing. So my normal swing, if you looked at it on video, you'll see that the club is a little bit steep in transition. So from here, I'm a little bit steep and I shallow the club later on the way down. That causes the face to rotate up and I'll block it right, especially a driver. Or I'll shallow the club late, which is, I should have said this before, potentially thinking about that. A lot of players do is they'll come in still steep, shallow the club later. In essence, then you'll save it with the hands here, and then you're really hooking it. So that's me, right? I kind of always struggle with that. So right now, what I'm currently doing, and Clay's got me doing all kinds of things here, right? But what I'm currently doing, or what I used to do in my backswing, I'll go here, good, and I'll begin to get the face too shallow in the backswing here. So this is kind of accurate for me. So then as I go to the very top, I'll get my hands, but I'll be too far over here. I'm kind of exaggerating this at this point. So as I start the downswing, I'll pull down on the handle so you can see how that momentum. So if I'm going from here, and then I'm pulling down on the handle, that momentum of the force into the handle will steepen out the club shaft. So then, of course, again, what I'm doing here. So for me personally, not to say this is for you, this is me. I'm just trying to share this so I can have something as people ask questions here. For me personally, sorry, well, my wife is texting me about my mother. All good? Okay, good. So what I try to do here is try to feel my club is more of an upright plane. So in essence, I'm feeling the club. This is an extreme because I'm too much this way. We want to feel more. I'm trying to feel more here as if the club is completely balanced. So that would be, I'll talk more about wrist set in a second. So here, so then as I go from to the very top of my swing, actually the club shaft is in a more, neutral or kind of that aesthetically pleasing swing. So that allows me to have space to now shallow it out. Before, where I used to be here, I would bring the club down, I'll steepen it out this way. So now I feel like I'm here, and I'll shallow it out. So same deal, I'll try to go like this, and really try to over-exaggerate and really shallow it out. Hit a lot of golf balls doing that here recently. So I've been working on that. So let me talk a little bit on, there's a question there, I'm going to finish this here and I'll get to that question. Wrist set, as I do that, as we go into the backswing, what we're trying to achieve, and this is actually the sequencing of wrist set. I'm going to first move, there's not a lot of wrist set here. As we continue on, it's a gradual radial deviation wrist set to thumbs up. So if you look from the down line angle here. So that gets the club in this is a more neutral position here, more stable position. It's about a 90-degree angle, maybe a little bit more, but more thumbs up. And as I continue on to the very top of swing, again, going back to what I was saying before, I'm beginning to have a little bit of flexion extension here at the very top. A little bit in transition. I had too much, and that caused me to steepen out there on the way down. So now momentum carries on to then shallow in transition. So that's just kind of a little bit what I'm working on here. Tom M, can you shallow the club too much? If so, how do you know the proper amount of shallowing? That's a great question. So there's two things that happen here. So to your point, there's a point of when we get to here in the transition where, I mean, this is actually, as long as you're rotating through, it's not too much. But this is the issue that lies with shallowing the club. As I was saying there a second ago, if I shallow the club too late, so let's say if I go here and I shallow the club, but I continue to shallow my downswing, so I continue to create depth on the way down. So if I shallow the club and I continue to do that and let the club fall, obviously I'm over exaggerating this. Yes, you can see that gets you jammed, and I'm going to leave the face wide open. So again, you can shallow perfect here, but if you continue to go down, which that feels kind of awkward, not a lot of people do that, you can leave the face open there, and you're in essence shallowing the club too much in a way. But you're doing it too late. The other way around is that, yes, you can still come in steep in that first move, and then shallow the club late. You can see that goes this way again. Same thing here. I'm stuck, maybe early extending, leaving the face wide open there onto the way down. So there's a few factors to that. So the factor there is that, let's say if I shallow the club, the second thing really that we see common is creating too much depth into the hands. A lot of people go like this, and the hand path will drop too far back behind you. And again, same deal there. I'm too stuck. So it's not necessarily that you're shallowing the club too much. It's that your hand path is going like this all over the place. The club itself is shallowing. When it's shallow, the hands can stay in the same. Look at my hand path here. The hands can stay in the same plane, but I'm shallowing the club. A lot of people do is they'll go like this, and then their hand path changes a lot. So you see a lot of people do this. If you look at Matt Wolf, his hand path stays the same, just the club goes everywhere. And he does this. So the hands actually move the same plane, but the club's moving a lot. So again, what people do is they'll go like this, hand path, and shallow, and that's again the other bad thing there. So now going back to what I was saying, if we get the club really, really, really shallow within the downswing, let's say if I'm like Brooks Koepka is pretty shallow with his swing, right? And here, let's say we get it really shallow, right? Then if I start my downswing, I don't rotate open, then again, block it right or flip my hand. So from here, you have to rotate the hips open to impact to make sure that the face is coming in square. So you'll see what I do here is when I rotate, the hands follow the path of my rotation, but the club head works back out in front. It's not coming over the top, right? It's coming from here, and I rotate, the club head's working back out in front of my body here. So it's not too stuck here behind me. So rotation helps keep everything connected, I guess you can say, within the downswing, and you're not blocking out there to the right. So hopefully that answers your question there, Tom. Cool. So I will keep going on here. There's no other questions sitting in there. Talk about, I will still say on the same theme of shallowing, I guess. Well, since everyone's excited to shallow the club here. Again, going to a couple of things that I see. I was just kind of saying there a second ago. A couple of things that I see when shallowing the club is I see a lot of people that go here and they'll drop the hands back down, back this way. And that is, we do not want to do that. That equates to, again, what you'll see a lot of players do when they do that. And then downswing, you'll go here, drop it way down, you start extending out, right? And so you wasted bad shots. I try to flare it out. So you go here, and you start early extending there on the way down. So what we want is, again, when we shallow the club, we are literally just shallow, or you're feeling as if you're just shallowing the angle of the club shaft here. And then you can just rotate the body up in there to impact. So again, changing the path of the hands causes us to get stuck, and then we start losing posture, hitting it way right. So it's kind of like your diagnosis. If you find yourself hitting it way to the right while shallowing out, you could be changing the hand path too much and getting stuck within the downswing. Hopefully that helps out there. Tom M, can you explain how you can have forward shaft lean with the driver yet still hit up on the golf ball? Well, let me kind of put this here. Well, let's just pretend this is a driver in my hand. This is a 7-iron. So I want to, with ball position here, this is where that comes into play. So let's say normal ball position, my 7-iron is, let's say, somewhere right around here. I'm going to try to get the camera, catch up. Okay. And driver obviously is going to be off the lead foot here. So let's say 7-iron, I'm doing the same swing, and I'm shallowing out, and I'm rotating through the ball, and I come into this ball position here. Well, let me step back. Sorry. As I get to, when I get to max lag position, so that's roughly by the time left arm is parallel to the ground in the downswing, right? So that's here, and I have lag on the way down. By the time after max lag position, I'm already beginning to release the club. So I'm not, obviously from here, I'm not maintaining that angle, or else the club face is never going to get back to the ball, or else I'll be hitting it way to the right again. So after max lag position, I'm beginning to release that angle. So ball position here, so let's say ball position is dead middle, and I'm releasing it. You can see here, I have a lot of shaft lean. Now, let's move ball position further up. And that release continues. You can see I don't have as much shaft lean with the hand. So 7-iron, let's say, or 9-iron, whatever, back here, but I'm continuing to release here. And I don't have as much shaft lean because just simply in ball position. And because the ball position is further up into stance, let's think of your swing, obviously a big wide circle. Let me see here if I got a million training aids around here, and I can't find one alignment stick here. Give me 1 second. Let me get this here. Well, this isn't an alignment stick, but so the bottom of my circle here is right in the middle of my stance, let's just say, right? But you can see where this part here of the release, if I'm hitting the ball in this direction, so this is my stance, let's say, and I'm here, right? You can see how that's already coming on the up, but I'm not flipping my hands, right? I'm just kind of letting the natural ball position, letting the natural release get it to where I'm not flipping, and I'm also slightly coming up on the golf ball, right? Does that make sense there? So you're kind of seeing that, a little bit of that analogy with the bottom of your arc here. You're slightly coming up on the ball, but not adding loft to the face. Or I guess in essence, flipping as you hit up on the golf ball, which is again very, very common to do. So hopefully that helps you out there as far as generating shaft lean there. Yep, that was it. One with the driver. Cool. Let's talk about maintaining posture. Since we're talking about shallowing the club, we'll talk about maintaining posture there within rotation of lower body, because again, once we shallow the club, we also need to make sure that we're rotating hips open into the downswing. So again, what I was just saying a second ago, when people begin to shallow the club, this is another thing to consider as you're diving through the shallowing course, right? So now that you're getting the path of the club become more in to out, extremely common for people to start using your body to swing more in to out. So again, what we're creating here is loss of posture, or you are familiar with the term early extension. So that way. So again, remember, when we start the downswing, right, pressure initially goes into your left foot, but as I'm doing that, I'm getting lower with my legs. So you can see my knees are flexing more in the transition. So on average on tour, a lot of people just like to have like timing, when does this happen? How much knee flex should I have? Average on tour is about 10 degrees more of knee flex in the initial start of the downswing. So it goes like this here. So by the time left arm is parallel to ground in downswing, I'm at full squat in a way. Not full squat this way, but full 10 degrees less of an angle here from where I was at address. Then from here, I'm beginning to move up and back with my rotation. So it goes here, up and back with my rotation here. And by that, I'm able to maintain posture here, or keep my butt up against the wall as I'm rotating through. Another thing to consider too when we're talking about maintaining posture is making sure you're not keeping both glutes on the wall, right? Left glute on the wall as we rotate. And that's truly if I try to keep both butt cheeks on the wall here, I'm not going to rotate open. I'm just going to keep my posture. I don't want to flip my hands. So with that, if you're shallowing the club, always go all the way to kind of like your follow through. Make sure you're rotating and maintaining posture. Trying to stay low. If I shallow it out, trying to stay low with my hands coming into the ball. And that helps you, one, generate a lot of shaft, but helps you maintain your posture. So the number one thing to help out, like you saw Tiger doing this, prior to his accident, you saw him doing a lot of drills. He was going like this, right? He's getting his chest closer to the ball, and he's sticking his glutes out to maintain posture and help him rotate through the ball. So just want to talk a little bit on that because a lot of people do, when they shallow the club, they start really extending the swing more into out. Nico, hi. The video showing the shallowing of the club shows a position at impact where the club has forward shaft lean, and the club face is pointing towards the target. It follows that at address the club will not have forward shaft lean, therefore the club face should slightly close in order to ensure the club face is pointed toward the target at impact. Is this assumption correct? I want to reread that there, Nico. Sorry, forgive me for that. So shallowing the club shows position and impact where the club is forward shaft lean and the club face is pointing towards the target. Yeah, that's correct. It follows that at address, the club will not have forward shaft lean. Therefore, the club face should be slightly closed in order to ensure the club face is pointing toward the target at impact. So there's not as much forward shaft lean at address, right? So then, kind of general rule of thumb is at address position here. Assuming I got this correct here, Nico. So at address position here, I am going to have a little bit of forward shaft lean. So the buttoning club is roughly pointed at my logo of shirt right here at address. At impact, that's going to increase a little bit more. Buttoning club is pointed outside of lead shoulder. Face is more de-lofted. So at address, it's going to be not necessarily slightly closed, but it's definitely going to be de-lofted, right? Even at address position because you have a little bit of shaft lean. If I look here, right, if I take this club and it's straight up and down, the face, this is casted, this club here, so it's going to look like it's closed. It's just dead square. The face technically is square to target line, just has a lot of loft. Now, if I twist it, it's going to be open. If I twist it, it's going to be closed. So shaft lean just de-lofts the face, but the face technically is still squared on target line. If I don't have shaft lean, the face is still technically squared on target line, just not de-lofted. It's just same loft here. And if it's tilted back, it's still square down the target line, just has loft, maybe slightly open, but it's all a matter of little degrees there. So hopefully that helps out. So we do have a little bit of shaft in the address, not like we don't have any. And again, if I move it now to driver and I keep that buttoning club pointed out my left shoulder, if I move it back on my logo of my shirt here, and I move it to where, middle of my stance here, it's going to look like I have a lot more shaft lean. Again, for driver, and I keep the same thing, it doesn't look like I have a lot of address. They come into impact and rotate. I want to have a little bit more driver, not a lot, because of ball position and because I'm hitting up on the ball, kind of like we were talking about earlier. So hopefully that helps out there, Nika. Cool. Let's talk about, again, we're talking about shallowing the club quite a bit. We'll talk a little bit on maybe a little bit on backswing to help you get the club shallow. I talked a little bit about that a second ago. Oh, here's a question. Ken M, when pitching, how do you utilize the bounce by opening the face, but also maintain forward shaft lean? Don't these cancel each other out? Yeah, it's in a way, right? It's all, I think there's a way somewhere around here. Oh, maybe not. So let's say I'm going to use a 7-iron, right? And so let me talk about some numbers first. So average on tour at address. So average on tour at address uses a 58-degree wedge. So some guys have 56, some guys have 50, some guys use 60. And this is around the green. So this is about 20 yards and in. At address, the club face itself is open 63 degrees. So the face is slightly open to target line 63 degrees here. So that's exposing a little bit of bounce. As we come into impact here, the face itself is de-lofted about 45 degrees. So again, because of that, we're de-lofting to 45, which is roughly now pitching wedge loft. We're still able to utilize a little bit of bounce. So the face is de-lofted. You don't have a ton of leading edge. If I had a ton of leading edge, like this, then the face is going to be turned down to 30 degrees with a 60 degree or more, right? So then you're still able to utilize a lot of bounce by having the face slightly open and de-loft it. Now, the other side of that is you have to pay attention to angle of attack. Now, average angle of attack is actually kind of quite down. It's almost 5 degrees. So average angle of attack with a 7-iron is negative 44.3 on the PGA Tour with a 7-iron. With a wedge, it's negative with chipping, it's like negative 5.4 and 1 degree, and that's virtually 1 degree of golf. That's like nothing in reality. I mean, 1 degree is nothing. So they're still coming in essence. We're here, still creating a lot of shaft lean, but they're not hitting down on the ball. So if I try to create a lot of shaft lean, and let's say I hit, this is just a number, and this is actually kind of accurate for some people I have lessons to, with a chip shot, their angle of attack, a lot of people can hit down on it by like 10, 11 degrees. So now what you're doing is you're de-lofting the face, you're coming down on the ball, so you're exposing a lot of that leading edge. So you're killing the bounce on it. Plus, what you're also doing is that you're kind of doing a kind of popping motion. So if you catch it solid, so you're coming down on it, let's say with 45 degrees, hitting down on it 10 degrees, your spin loft's 55, so the ball actually pops up off the face. Does that make sense? So that's why for we want the face open. I think the deciding factor there for you is that if I'm coming in with a lot of shaft lean, we're not trying to hit down on the ball for a lot of shaft lean, right? Because of that angle of attack number. You still want to come into it fairly shallow, not super shallow. Obviously, it's like -5, so it's not the same as a 7-iron, right? But you're still coming with a ton of shaft lean. That will expose the bounce still by not bringing in that leading edge, by hitting down on it, and you're more shallow with your plane. So I hope that makes sense. That's a very roundabout way of going to how do you pitch and not hit with leading edge. Okay, next question. Let's go. I have next same question. When you put the club square at impact, then go back to address, club is closed unless you rotate upper body and tilt the spine, at least for me. So again, when you put the club face square at impact, right, and then go back to address position, the club face is closed unless you rotate your upper body open, I assume, and tilt the spine, at least for me. So that's sounds like more spine tilt is what you're assuming. So if we go here, impact, go back to address, yeah, club face is going to be closed, and you rotate with maintain spine tilt. Am I doing that correctly? I think that's what you're trying to do. It's kind of like to generate side bend. I think that's what you're saying there. Forgive me if I'm kind of interpreting that wrong. But yeah, I think that's what we're saying there. I'm going to try to speak to that a little bit, where it comes to if I'm here, but then upper body is open. I mean, let me kind of just say that, or I'll show you more from a down the line view. At impact, our chest is still open, technically open to the target anyway. So if I'm going here, yeah, hips are open on toward 45 degrees. Shoulders are actually open 10 to 12 degrees. But if I take my shoulder away, excuse me, my left shoulder away, look where my chest is pointed. So my chest is pointed out in front of the golf ball. It's a few feet out, down the same line as the ball out here in front. So the chest is opening as I do that. I hope that kind of makes sense, and that kind of speaks to what you're saying. And forgive me if I'm not quite interpreting it correctly, but I think that's kind of what you're getting at, and that helps obviously body, chest. If I keep the chest closed in relation to my rotation, so here's my chest here, then I'm going to get stuck, and I'll always flip my hands because I have to get the face square, or else I'm going to hit behind it or leave the face wide open. So I hope I answered your question. So let's go, Tom, and comment one thing that might interest some of us in a video analysis of the touring pros where the shallowing comes from. When I look at these guys, very few of them seem to shallow the club. That's almost all of them shallow the club to an extent. There's not really, it's all pathwise. So just maybe, Tom, when we're shallowing the club, it's this angle here, right? So that's shallow. And if you kind of look at every tour player, I mean, some guys like Phil, he's here. Adam Scott's like here. Tiger is here. Like Brooks Koepka is here. Tommy Fleetwood's about there. So some guys are a little bit more, but I kind of will say, in a very, not to sound rude or anything, but there's nobody would be on the PGA Tour if they weren't shallow with the club. To put it simply, you cannot. If you're steep in this transition here, like again, the only one who is steep is Gary Woodland. Like he's actually very steep. He has a lot of lag like this, but he rotates. So his swing is here, has so much lag within the swing. He's a little bit of an outlier. The club is technically still slightly shallow, but he's here. But he rotates very open. So he shallows the club a little bit later in transition, rotates extremely open. So that's why his ball flight is a baby fade, right? Starts off straight and falls to the right. But he's literally the only one on tour. You look at I'll tell you this, probably the top 100 players on the PGA Tour currently right now, all of them are going to have that club fairly shallow. Again, the only two that I can think of right now are going to be Phil, who's like here, Phil Mickelson, and then Gary Woodland, who's here. But there's, again, some other factors to that. Phil also shallows the club late. Face comes open, he actually really extends, and that's why he's very handsy. And that's why he's one of he's not a good driver of the golf ball. In reality, everyone can believe that no matter who you are, Phil can hit it crooked like none other, right? And so Gary Woodland, now he's won a major championship, but if I go steep here and I don't get the time to rotate open, the ball can go very crooked for even Gary Woodland, especially as fast as he's swinging. So that's why it's super important when we shallow the club. And that's why, again, every single tour player shallows the club. When we get to here, the faces, it squares out your path and face, you rotate open and release the club out there in front. So it's just so consistent over and over and over again when we get the club shallow in the transition. So hope that helps there, Tom. But yeah, actually I meant to have the close the upper body a little and hit this and tilt the spine to keep the club face square. Yeah, that will do it. No, thanks for clarifying that. That'll definitely keep the club face square for sure if I do this. But again, if I do that here and I keep the body closed with a lot of tilt, then what we're doing is to release it, you have to create extension flexion here in your hands. In essence, you're flipping. To do that, instead of turning through the ball and the face is releasing more down the line. So if I'm doing this here, and this gives us a false impression that we're actually releasing it instead of twisting our hands, right, and twisting to get the face closed. So this feels like you're releasing it, and we can hit the ball straight by doing that. It's going to be really difficult to do that on a very, very consistent basis, while also time that up and really optimize your club. So you'll be potentially adding off to the face, high. Maybe for you might notice your ball flight. If you catch it well, maybe you're picking it off the turf while you're doing this. And your ball flight's really high. You hit it solid, but it's high. Maybe you can go a little bit right. Obviously, draw on you. So there's some factors there with that. So again, I would say, you still want to maintain spine tilt, but let yourself rotate. So this is, again, we're going through the factor of side bend within the downswing to create that. So try that out. That might help you out too, as far as, from what you're telling me, as far as when we're getting the face, we're trying to close the face, coming back to the dress position here. But try to let yourself rotate, even allow your chest to rotate open here. But you're talking about your spine tilt here and create, or what I'm saying here, a little bit of that side bend within the downswing. So hopefully that helps. Cool. Well, I got a few minutes here. If anybody else has any other questions, I'll talk a little bit on. Oh, it looks like there is one. Okay, no. All right, good. Well, if no one has any other questions here, then I will talk a little bit on backswing, I guess, a little bit here, and to help you shot. I kind of said this a second ago. One thing I was going to say this earlier is, let's call this like just position one for reference sake. It's not like position one, position two here. Again, what's very common when people try to shallow the club, they'll bring the path too flat and too inside behind you here. So it goes like this. So if I get this here, you could technically stay there and stay shallow by going pretty flat. You look at Ricky Fowler, he's a very flat playing swinger. Even for him, he gets really flat here, and he actually steepens the club in the transition, and then he shallows the club back out. It's going so fast, but you can imagine his swing. That's what's happening. So my suggestion for everybody is if we can nail this position down. Again, let's call this when left arm is parallel to the ground. Let's call that position 2 for what have you. So we go here. Try to look for the position of your hands, and we're looking for the hands here to be in line with more of my chest, like right pec to sternum of the chest here. So that gets the club in a more stable position. The hands are more stable here. So then from here, I'm just going to rotate, and that's just lift my arms to the very top if you can, and that creates room to shallow the club in the transition. So just something to think about there. I see a lot of players do when we're talking about shallowing the club. A lot of people begin to flatten out their plane in the way back, and they get you stuck. You'll steepen it out, and you'll come even potentially more over the top that way. So, well, other than that, I think it's all the questions and all the time that we got for today. And I appreciate you guys kind of trusting me with the office hours as Q's out today. I don't normally do this. I do this maybe once a quarter. I'm usually out there giving lessons or teaching a clinic, which we have a distance clinic actually this weekend. I do believe all of our clinics are sold out before the summer. We don't do any in the summer. We'll pick them back up in the fall. We may do one in May that we haven't released yet. So other than that, if there's anything I can do for you in-person wise, clinics wise, or then of course online lessons wise, send me an email, robin@topspeedgolf.com. So wish everyone best of luck in their game. Keep working hard on it. Keep throwing in the reps on that new shallowing course. Shallowing does not happen overnight. I will tell you that 1,000%, even for a tour player. So make sure that you throw in the reps. Get over-exaggerated. Video yourself from the down the line video. Video yourself from face on them. Make sure you are doing it correctly, and that'll save you a world of headache. All right, so best of luck. Thank you guys so much again. Hope you all have a good rest of your week. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I got my green on. I have my Aaron Hills belt. I hope you guys have your green on as well. Enjoy St. Patrick's Day, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, and take care.